my biggest goal is I don't want to shoot a buck unless it's 5.5 or older. Regardless if it's 140 inches, if it's 180 inches, if it's a big mature deer, I'm willing to take the deer, especially if I have a lot of history with it.
Right.
That means a lot to me. But what I look for is just maturity. I love to have history with a buck. I would rather kill a buck that's 130 inches that I had 5 years of history with than a buck that was 150 that I'd never even seen before.
Right.
Oh, you got her, dude. She's down. Let's go.
Dude, I just shot a deer of a lifetime.
Freaking smoked him.
One with nature, and if you're a believer, one with God.
Definitely gets your heart pumping. Boy, you are in trouble.
Fall Obsession Podcast.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome back to another Fall Obsession Podcast episode. I'm Sam Thrash, your host this week. Our podcast is driven by Ridge Rock Hunt Company. I'll talk about them at the end. Super excited to be podcasting with our guest this week. She's very knowledgeable in the realm of whitetail and wildlife management, but then she also kills some really, really big deer, and it's impressive to watch. Our special guest is Emily Schaad this week. Welcome to the podcast, Emily.
Hey, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you for sure. So, and we were talking right before we got started recording. You know, we learned about you through the working class bow hunter guys and all the folks over there. We're loyal listeners to that, and encourage anybody who's not to definitely go check out their podcast. It's awesome. But that's where we kind of first heard of you and started following your journey on Instagram for a while, and what led us to reaching out to having you on the show. But for our listeners who don't know who you are, can you just kind of give us a rundown on where you're from and what you do with whitetail deer?
Yeah, so I'm Emily Schaad, and I was born and raised here in Southern Ohio. So that's still where I reside and where I do pretty much all of my whitetail hunting is down here. So, yep, that's kind of my big hunting zone, and I'm a whitetail fanatic. I love whitetails. I love going out west and everything, but I'm a whitetail gal at heart. So,
yeah, for sure. So, and you have multiple different farms or properties, places that you have access to and that you manage in some extent. What is that like, juggling all those around? And you don't have to give away secrets, but you know, roughly how many are you working with on a regular basis?
yeah, so it's a lot of work. I permission hunt, let's see, 1, 2, 3 main farms, and then I purchased my own farm a couple 3 years ago. So I've been doing a lot of work on it as well. But I don't do any leases or anything like that. Like I said, I own my own farm, plus I permission hunt 3 other farms. So some of them I can do some management stuff on. Some it's kind of like you can't really do much since you don't really own the place or, you know, lease or pay money or anything like that for it. It's kind of like, you know, you can do the best of your ability to manage and pass deer and stuff like that. But just like any place else, a lot of times, especially being some of them are smaller acreages, it's kind of hard to manage deer when neighbors and stuff around you kind of just, you know, shoot the deer that you pass up and stuff. But I still try to do my hardest to get certain bucks to live through. And actually, since I purchased my farm a couple 3 years ago, I have not even hunted my farm, period. I'm just letting it go and trying to grow giants, and then once I have one, then I'll go in and hunt it. So hopefully this year maybe I'll get lucky. I don't know.
Yeah. So roughly how big is your farm?
So it's not really that big. It's hard to find like big acreage parcels around here. Mine's like just over 40 acres.
Okay.
It's probably got 10 acres or so of tillable on it, and the rest is timber. It has like a big creek system and stuff that comes through it. So it's not huge, but it's a decent amount that you can work with, and it's got kind of everything that you need when it comes to, you know, your water, your oaks, and your tillable acreage for planting crops and such like that. So, and I have pretty good neighbors. I don't really have a lot of hunting pressure, so that's really nice. I was worried about that when I got it, but So far, so good. Fingers crossed. Hopefully it stays that way. But
Yeah. So I want to back up a little bit. I certainly want to go the direction of talking more specifics about some of your management strategies and the mentality behind that and everything. But backing up a little bit further, how did you get into this? How did this become such a passion for you as far as, being this involved with the whitetail habitat?
I guess when I was little, my grandpa always used to hunt. He was a gun hunter, which most people were kind of back in the old days. So, I kind of went out with grandpa some. But then my dad, he was a big game guide out in Idaho for like 36 years for like elk and bear hunts. He was a super good whitetail hunter, turkey hunter, and everything back here. So pretty much hunting was like something that I just didn't have a choice but to like, because that's all he ever did. And animal mounts out all over through the house and stuff. So I went on my first hunt with him when I was 12 and killed my first buck. And then from there on, it was just kind of like I was just sort of addicted to it, even at that young of age. And at age 13, actually, I decided that I didn't even want to gun hunt for whitetails anymore. I wanted to do bow only. So I worked all summer. I purchased my first compound bow, which was a Matthews Switchback XT at age 13. And I have been bow hunting since. And that's pretty much it. I have no interest in chasing whitetails with a gun. I just like to do it with a bow only. And I went to school for wildlife sciences, graduated with a degree in wildlife sciences, worked for the ODNR doing seasonal positions and stuff like that. So it's always been something that I've really been interested into, the forestry, the wildlife management side. And then it just got to be, once I started hunting and starting to, get some good bucks under my belt with the bow, it just became an absolute addiction, and it just keeps going.
Yeah. Oh, I completely understand that. I went bow only. It was probably I don't know, 10, 11 years ago now, and It was right after I shot actually what is still my biggest buck to date, and I shot him with a rifle. And don't get me wrong, I was excited, I was ecstatic, I was just absolute over the moon for it, but it was too easy. I was like, because it was a deer that I had never seen before. It was like first week in December, and he came rolling out kind of a second rut in Texas, and I put him down like within 30 seconds of seeing him for the very first time. And after that, it was a no-brainer, but at the same time I was like, man, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to be close. And I was bow hunting and rifle hunting at the time, but that right there locked in my bow only mentality, and I haven't gone back. So I understand completely.
There's just something about chasing with a whitetail with a bow that it's something completely different than chasing them with a gun. I don't know. I've just never been much of a gun hunter, and I probably never will. Nothing against gun hunting, but it's just something that I've just never really been that interested in. I just love to chase with the bow.
Yeah, no, I completely understand that for sure. So going back to your farm or any of the properties that you're involved in at various capacities and everything, well, let's use your farm specifically then. When you purchased this, or what were you looking for? Because you were obviously probably shopping for something, or had a plan in mind at some point. You wanted to have your own piece, but what were you looking for when you were in the market for something like that?
So, I was pretty picky. I was really looking for something that was a reasonable distance from my other properties, just so it was easier for me to watch over, and, pop out there quickly if there was a deer I needed to hunt, something I didn't have to drive super far away to get to. And that way I could get equipment out there and stuff like that. But mainly my biggest thing was I was looking for a farm that had tillable acreage. Here in Ohio, we can bait. The baiting thing, I'm not a big fan of, because everybody does it, and it's kind of like a competition of who has the biggest corn pile. And I foresee in the future, probably, I could be wrong, that they end up eliminating baiting in Ohio. So a big thing for me was to find a property with tillable acreage, because if they do get rid of baiting And even if they don't, like right now, I want something that I can plant crops and leave standing. I can plant food plots and such. That way I can hunt deer in a natural feeding pattern instead of pulling them in with a corn pile, just because that's just not, I'm just not really into that. I've done it, but it's not my favorite thing at all. I'd rather hunt deer over natural food. So that was my biggest thing, was tillable acreage in order to plant crops, either corn, soybeans, alfalfa, things like that. And having something with oaks. I mean, oaks is a really big thing, especially for early season time frame, and something that had water. So this property, it needed some work. It still does need work, but it's got everything you want, bedding, and all that. So I've been doing a ton of work to it, and it's came a long way. But it definitely has everything that I wanted in a smaller acreage chunk.
Yeah. No, the hunting small acreage, that's a jackpot to have that much on a small piece.
Yeah.
Before the property we had now, the property we hunted that 8-10 years ago, it was a smaller piece as well. It was less than 70 acres, I think, but it didn't have water, and very few deer actually bedded and lived on the property. So we were able, with like food plots and other things, to bring them in and give them a reason to travel through. But
Yeah.
we still even felt at that the limitations that we had without having just those other two key elements included. So to have I understand the struggles that come with hunting small pieces, but to have that much offered in that chunk is pretty awesome. So
Yeah. Yep, exactly. So it worked out. It seems like the deer really like to bed there. And I'm like, last year I planted corn and turnips, and the rest was just grass, just because I just didn't have enough time to get everything planted. This year, the local farmer, which is super, super nice and helpful to me. We kind of have a deal going. He helps me out because he's got bigger equipment than I do. So
awesome.
he helps me plant and put down fertilizer and spray. So a couple weeks ago, he went in and sprayed off a 5-acre section of field. We're going to no-till beans into that field because I do have somewhat of a slope in my fields that tends to wash. It did last year when I planted my turnips. So we're going to no-till beans in this year and just see how that goes. We're probably going to leave them standing for the deer. That way, I just want to get some protein and stuff pumped into them and try to get, the deer and stuff build up. There really wasn't much nutrition in that area when I bought the place. So I'm just really trying to add nutrition to try to get the herd healthier and the bucks, getting bigger and stuff like that. So I'm hoping with everything, it'll definitely help out.
Yeah, for sure. So first off, kudos to you for not hunting it for 2-3 years. Like you said, like there's very few people that I think would have the patience to do that. I don't know if I'd have the patience to stay off of it like that. But without getting specific on your deer, what kind of differences have you seen in your, either the size of your deer or populations, however you want to put it? What differences have you seen from your initial scouting efforts after you purchased it to where you're at today?
So I know when I had walked the piece, I actually walked it like 2 or 3 times before I even purchased it, because I just wanted to walk like every inch of it to see what was going on. There was a lot of deer sign and stuff in the bottom. There were some buck tracks and trails and stuff like that. There was deer sign there. I'm familiar with the area, which I was already familiar with the area to begin with. So I knew the potential for big deer is there.
Right.
So I knew that. I knew it was going to take some time and some work. I know when I first started and I popped some cameras out, some mineral, some feed to just try to see what was going on in the area. I really didn't have too much. I hardly had any does at all. Just didn't really have much for bucks in the way of anything. The following year, it seemed like the population increased a lot more because there was no hunting pressure at all on the farm area because I left it alone, so the deer stayed in there. Like I said, I added some mineral sites. I had turnips. I have a cornfield. It seemed like the population almost seemed to double. I had several good bucks on there, but unfortunately EHD hit us here, and I'm thinking it wiped all those bucks out because they all disappeared in that August time frame, and I never saw them again. I did find one big one dead on the creek, but it was one that I'd never seen before. So I don't know if they ended up dying on farther down the creek or something. So I really wasn't left with much, unfortunately, which was a really bummer because I was getting really excited until that happened. So I don't know what I'm going to have this year. I have one in particular I've been watching the last couple years to just try to see what he turns into. But that's kind of the only one that I'm really looking forward to just seeing because I've let him go the last couple years. But all my other ones, I think they got killed off by EHD. So that's been a bummer.
That sucks. Wow.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you some questions, not specific just to that property, but your management efforts, your mentality in general. The first one, there's a lot of different directions you can go with this, but what, in your mind, what makes a shooter buck? What do you look for in a buck to be like, that's the deer that I'm going to pursue this year?
So it used to be when I started out, it was 140-inch deer. So then I killed 140-inch deer with my bow. And then after that, I focused on maturity. So my biggest goal is I don't want to shoot a buck unless it's 5.5 or older. Regardless if it's 140 inches, if it's 180 inches, if it's a big mature deer, I'm willing to take the deer, especially if I have a lot of history with it.
Right.
That means a lot to me. But what I look for is just maturity. I love to have history with a buck. I would rather kill a buck that's 130 inches that I had 5 years of history with than a buck that was 150 that I'd never even seen before.
Right.
So maturity and history is kind of my two big things. I mean, don't get me wrong. If a giant comes through I've never seen before, I'm going to be excited about it. But I really like to build like a backstory and history with a buck and then finally kill him. So
yeah, that's cool. That's that definitely I share that with you, that it can definitely add to the experience. I get equally as excited, I feel like, when any buck walks out. Of course, I'm down here in Texas and I don't have Ohio caliber whitetails on my place, but there was a buck 2 years ago that I had some history with. I actually didn't see him, put my own eyes on him until I think it was end of October. It's the first time I ever saw him, and it was at 20 yards. Boom, first light, there he is, and I didn't get a shot.
Wow.
I didn't get a shot at him at all. And after that, it was cat and mouse the rest of the season, and he's still walking around out there as far as I know. So I'm still
that's good.
playing that game with him at least. But it's I definitely, the suspense building is awesome as well. So I enjoy it.
Yep, you can't beat it.
No, not at all. What and just going off, like, you have a lot of experience from what I've gathered from, just watching you the past several seasons and stuff, and then listening to your podcast with the working class. How many bucks have you had that you have a history with, or that are getting to the point where they're on that hit list that you lose? Like they stop showing up. And how does your mentality change when a deer does that?
So there's been a couple bucks actually the last couple years. Unfortunately, I lost a couple of my favorite whitetails. They ended up both getting killed by neighbors, which they went to great neighbors, not complaining at all, super happy for them. But I had many, many, many years of history with a buck that I called Heavy and a buck that I called Dagger. I watched them from just little tiny deer growing up, 2-year-olds getting their sheds, all the way up to 5 and 6-year-olds. And it was just super neat to watch them grow and watch, how they changed in the way of being young and dumb to being super mature and smart, and how their mentality and their habits changed. And they actually taught me a lot. I mean, they kicked my butt, to be honest, but they taught me a lot about chasing mature deer by chasing them and walking them over the years. But it was unfortunate to lose both of those deer. They were super, super unique bucks. Dagger was kind of a non-typical. Heavy was just a giant big main-framed 8-point. He was just a gorgeous deer. I got lots of sheds off of them and stuff, but it is heartbreaking when they disappear or they get killed, especially when you have that many years and that much time put into them. But it's always neat to look back and remember the story and kind of like what they taught you while you were trying to hunt them.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's not always about the. I mean, granted, we all wanna kill big deer, and when, as we just talked about, when you have that history, definitely you want to write that final chapter, but it's not. I think what some people don't realize is it's not always about the ending, if you will. And you're talking about good neighbors, being the ones to take that deer, and then you yourself learning from those experience. Some people take that for granted. Some people would just get frustrated and look at that as, oh, sucks to be me, woe is me. But to take something away from it nonetheless and learn from it and learn something about whitetails out of it, I think is a awesome way to look at it for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
So, listening to a podcast before we recorded this one, I heard about a experience that you had with some not so nice neighbors, and
Yep.
and I know obviously you've told that story on that show, but not making you go into great detail about it. But we have, just through our own avenues of content on our end, we have had some focus in recent months over kind of that hunter etiquette, and we actually had one of our own good guys up in Michigan, is where he's from. He actually had a deer that I think is his wife's deer, actually, that he lost just because his neighbor was being a turd. So do you want to just share with our listeners a little bit kind of what you had to go through with that one?
Yeah, I won't go into great detail on it, but yeah, I had some new neighbors move in behind or right next to a property that I hunt. And long story short, they ended up getting access somehow through the property that I hunted to get to their property instead of just going through their property and hunting. And they hung their stand technically on the property that I was hunting. They claimed it was on them, but it really wasn't. And they hung it about around 50 yards away from mine, facing my stand. And they would come in late and go and would hunt, and then they would know when I was in the stand, and they would come out early, like during prime time. When the deer would move, they would see that I'd have deer in front of me. They would come out, run all my deer off, and then take off. They would talk, they would carry on, they'd drive side by side. I mean, it was just nonsense, absolute nonsense. Like, there was no reason for it at all. I mean, I'd been here for 9 years hunting. They're from out of state. They just showed up and just took over the place and tried running me out of there, which usually doesn't work. I stand my ground pretty good, so it didn't go over well at all. But it just, I mean, there's no reason for that. I mean, we all have to respect each other. We all have to respect, fence lines and things like that. There's no point in getting crazy with each other. I mean, we're all out here trying to kill a deer. I mean, there's no point in disrespecting each other, because in the end, everything that they did to me, they ruined their own hunt as well too, in the process of trying to ruin mine. So in the end, nobody won. Nobody won the battle. All my hunts were ruined. Their hunts was ruined. There was just no sense in it.
Yeah.
So a lot of things changed the next year, and they weren't allowed to have access to a lot of stuff because of that. So now they just mind their business, and everybody minds their own business, and nobody sees each other anymore. So it's been nice.
Yeah, that's good.
But I mean, that's what ruined my hunt for Heavy, was all of that commotion and pressure and stuff pushed him off. And in the end, a different neighbor ended up killing him. So it was kind of multiple things. It was just a really bad year with dealing with people and stuff like that. But I mean, I'm an easy person to get along with. I respect people's property lines. I respect other hunters. If they're hunting a property, I'm not going to try to get permission on it and run over top of them. It's just something you just have to just learn common courtesy and respect for other people.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
Sometimes it's hard to find that nowadays.
Yeah, it's a rough world for sure, and there's no,
Yeah.
to your point, there's no reason to be like that, and
No.
it's just so much unnecessary stuff. So,
Yeah. Yep. For sure.
yeah. So in your efforts and your endeavors with these permission pieces that you have, um, you led on a little bit at the beginning about how you're limited on the efforts that you can make on those places. So what do you look for in, how do you find, not just obtaining permission, but how do you find a piece that you want to hunt under those circumstances, and then what are you able to do within any limitations that there are?
So anytime it seems like, which I've been in the area long enough that I've kind of learned where people hunt, what properties like people don't hunt, what properties I can get access to. But when people are looking for places to hunt, and when I look for places to hunt or even scout out west and stuff, I mean, OnX is like my best tool for things to look at property sizes, property owners, kind of realizing, who owns the property, and then knocking on doors and just talking with people, and just getting to learn like if they have other people that hunt, or if they even allow hunting, and respecting that landowner's decision, and not kind of like pushing my way in through the door, and things like that. But most of these areas I've been fairly familiar with for the last few years, so I've been able to gain access just because of that, and then having a good relationship with those landowners. I help the one landowner out farm, so I help him do farming and move equipment and things like that, and stop in and see how he's doing. So it's kind of like I have a good relationship with those landowners. I'm not just hunting their farm and just not giving them anything. Like, I
Right.
like to stop in and ask them if they need help with things, and help them out with stuff and things like that, in order to keep a good relationship. I think is really important when it comes to gaining access to a private piece to hunt.
Yeah. The Just gaining access and the permissions, or the bartering system like that, it's so foreign to me. Granted, I've lived in Texas pretty much my whole life, and other than a couple out of state trips, have pretty exclusively hunted here. And down here, it is just that is so foreign, and you just don't do that. Like, you wouldn't dare
Yeah.
start up a conversation with somebody just to see if you could barter to hunt their land or anything like that. Like, that's an automatic no down here. It is a different world for sure. Hunting properties down here are hard to come by. So I'm
Yeah.
always curious whenever I meet somebody that you know does that on the regular basis. So
Yeah, and it kind of depends on what state and what areas you're looking at. Some states, I feel like it's impossible to just gain access to hunt without either paying a lease or something like that. Around here, it's not as bad, but there's been a lot of places that it's been a hard no. They're leased out to hunting groups or out of state folks or in state folks, or, things like that. So, I mean, it's still hard to find private ground and just permission hunt,
yeah,
no doubt. And a lot of times I've run into people where they just don't allow hunting in general, which I totally respect that. They just like to see the wildlife. They don't want anybody to shoot them. That's perfectly fine. Normally those properties, though, I can get access to shed hunt and stuff like that, and I respect their decision to not allow hunting. That's not an issue with me whatsoever. So it's kind of one of the things, you just building relationships with people, I think is the biggest thing to, be able to hunt, and respecting their land, and not driving around on your side by side and different things like that. So.
yeah. So before you had your own piece of land, did you exclusively just hunt off of permissions, or did you have any leases or anything like that?
I had a lease. It was probably, I'd say, about 10, 11 years ago. I was part of a lease. It was 1,200 acres. It was a little out of my way to go to at the time, between working and things like that. I did hunt it some, but then it just kind of, I don't know, it just really wasn't that big a thing for me. So I
Yeah.
ended up getting out of it and then just permission hunting only. So besides that, I mean, I've just permission hunted only for years. I used to hunt my grandpa's farm. That ended up changing hands when he passed away, and I completely lost all of that, which was unfortunate.
Yeah.
But luckily, I was able to pick up some other stuff to hunt. So
Yeah. So with the permission hunting, I'm assuming you've been able to despite that and maybe some ebb and flow with that, you've still been able to build some relationships or that history that we were talking about with some big deer on these places. So
yes.
that's awesome. What
Yep, actually this deer right here you see behind me, the
Yeah.
freak. I built quite a few years of relationship with this guy here before I killed him on a permission piece, so that was pretty cool.
I was gonna ask about that one later on because I was looking at him back there, and if folks are watching the podcast
Yep, and
video, they'll see it.
my ice buck, you can see him. He's that I killed a couple years ago. He's above him there, so that was actually on the same farm.
That's awesome. And now that's the one with the giant brows, right?
Yeah, yep, he's the one with the big giant split brows.
That's what I thought. I remember seeing a post when you killed that deer, and it was super cool, and I like big mainframe deer like that. It's just they're so cool. It's
you
awesome.
can't beat just a big framey deer.
Yeah.
You can't beat them.
No, not at all. That's awesome. So that one's probably one of them, but what are some of the kind of as best as you can summarize, what are some of the memorable stories or the memorable bucks that you have from over the years that you've built these histories with and that you've ended up writing that final chapter on and sealing the deal?
Yeah, so Freak was one of them, the ice buck, which is above him, that I killed in the ice storm in February of 2022, second to last day of Ohio bow season. I had several years of history with him, but he was a big mature whitetail when I killed him. He was at his biggest when I killed him. I think he was around like 145, 146 in score there, mature bucks. So I was super happy to put my hands on him, just especially because he was a big mature deer. And then Flyer 10, which you can't see, he's up on the wall on this side. I killed him back in 2018. I had 5 years of history with him. I had multiple sheds off of him, multiple encounters with him, saw him on the hoof several times during bow season, and was finally able to seal the deal on him. So it was super neat watching him change patterns and stuff over the years and grow into a big mature deer, and how his rack changed over the years from when he was younger to when he became more mature and stuff like that. So I've had several years of history and was able to kill 3 of the big bucks that I have in the room here. I have several others, but they were bucks that I took during the rut. So I'd never really had history with them before. They were giants, but I didn't really have a backstory with them. And then obviously I've had a couple other bucks that I've had several years of history with too, that I ended up not, sealing the deal on. But yeah.
Awesome. What's your biggest buck to date?
So Freak back here, he was 190 and 6'8".
190.
6'8" gross. He's definitely my biggest. So
that's awesome.
I've got several in the 150, 160s range, but he definitely topped the chart there.
Wow, that is incredible. That's a stud. So you'll have to educate me a little bit as far as how it works in your local area, but how many whitetail bucks or deer in general are you allowed to kill per year?
So you can only kill one antlered deer per year. I'm not even sure how many does you can kill, honestly. I don't really pay too much attention to that. I probably should this year because I need to do some major doe management. But yeah, you can just kill one buck per season. Okay.
So how does that impact you or just the areas in general with any reasonably like-minded people that you might know or I don't know, hunt close to, whatever the case might be, in regards to like cull bucks or bucks that really need to be taken out of the herd? How does that change your mentality or impact your thought process at all?
I feel like it would be handy to have it to where you could take one of those coal bucks or management bucks out of the herd, because to be honest, there's a pile of them around here. But then if you're also hunting a big mature giant, it's kind of hard to shoot a coal buck when you have that mature giant that you've had tons of history with that you're after
Yeah.
as well. So in some circumstances, it would be nice to take those coal bucks out, but it seems like here in the last couple of years, I really haven't had to worry about it because we've had so many new neighbors and stuff coming around that they pretty much just wipe everything out anyway.
They
So
just
I
shoot
don't
all the
really have to
young dumb deer.
worry.
Yeah.
I don't really have to worry about the coal bucks making it or the big bucks making it. It seems like it's hard for any of them to make it. So
Well, I guess that's a solution. Maybe not the one that you want, but
yeah, it's not really the one that I want, but I mean, whatever works, I guess.
yeah, for sure. So in your neck of the woods and in your experience, perfect world, when is the best time to kill a big deer?
So my favorite time to kill a big buck is the first red moon in October.
Interesting.
I have followed the red moon for the last several years, and I've really paid attention to the cameras, the dates of the red moon, and the October 10th is when I killed Freak. That was actually, it was the last day of red moon. He had daylighted every day during the red moon. In my experience, the last couple years, during those same dates, around the 8th to the 10th of October, it seems like any big mature buck that I've had on camera has showed up in daylight during that beginning of the October red moon.
Huh.
Unfortunately, sometimes the wind was wrong and I couldn't hunt, and they were standing in front of the camera, of course. But it seems like those dates are like my favorite times to hunt. I had a big mature buck come in October 6th last season. And I had him less than 20 yards, but he was facing me. By the time he turned, it was after dark. During red moon, couldn't get a shot at him. So it proves that every year around those dates the big bucks are always on their feet in daylight, and that is my ultimate favorite time to hunt.
Interesting. Well, I've never heard somebody narrow it down that specifically in regards to the red moon and that phase and everything. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I used to be a rut fan when I was younger, but I'll have to tell you, I honestly hate hunting the rut, and I have zero interest in hunting the rut, and I haven't the last 3 years.
Really?
I absolutely hate hunting the rut. So all of my big bucks disappear. I see no deer action at all, which a big factor in that is probably too many does. There's too much lockdown. There's no chasing. There's no running. There's no camera. There's no action on cameras. You see nothing when you're in the stand. I have no interest in hunting the rut at all. It's early season time frame or either like late season, like January time frame.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense on smaller pieces or that kind of thing. And I do remember having that feeling a couple times when we had our smaller piece. Where we're at now, we manage 800 acres in Texas, and we have sanctuaries, we have bedding, we have water, we have food, we have all that stuff. So the rut just seems like this awesome time, to us where anything could happen. But you brought my mind back to that smaller property mentality, in which case, yeah, with those other times, those other phases might be a whole lot more profitable for somebody in your situation. That makes sense. So
yeah, and I really like to pattern a deer.
Yeah.
And when I feel like I'm just sitting in the woods and there's no pattern or rhyme or reason to anything, it drives me crazy. Like, I like to know like where the deer is going to be coming from, and during the rut, it's just like you just never know what's going to be coming or where, or if you're even going to see anything, and there's no pattern to anything. And I just really like to hunt a deer when I know like a pattern, when I know for sure if I sit out there's going to be a good chance that I'm going to kill that deer or see that deer. So I really like that whole aspect of it.
Awesome. What how many cameras do you run on a small piece? You can use your own property as an example on that.
It just depends. If I have a buck that I'm targeting on an area, um, I'll have cameras everywhere. I remember when I was trying to pattern freak, I can't even remember how many cameras that I had out, but it was just a stupid amount of cameras because I was just trying to just figure out what the heck he was doing or where to even hang a stand
Yeah.
or anything, and just trying to figure out exactly what he was doing to hang a stand. And once I finally figured it out, I didn't even hang a stand until the night that I killed him.
Wow.
Just because I didn't want to hang a stand previous and it not be in the right spot. So, I think I had probably, about 10 or 12 cameras on the one end of that farm, just trying to figure him out. And that was before I had cell cameras. Now I have cell cameras plus regular cameras as well. So that kind of helps.
Oh, yeah, it helps a bunch for sure. You hang and hunt a lot, I guess.
Yeah, I do. I do a lot of sets and just leave them there all year, but I do keep a couple sets back to do hanging hunts, just because you just never know, especially when you're hunting oaks and things like that. Acorns are starting to drop. Bucks transition to certain areas with oak trees is producing a lot. So I'll do hanging hunts there, or if I do hunt the rut, normally I just only hang and hunt. When I hunt the rut, I'll just go to an area that's got a lot of rut sign and I'll pop up a tree and just hang out there. But yeah, I do like to keep a couple sets back for hanging hunts.
Gotcha. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Especially when you have the options for that. I'm jealous. I'm down here in the scrub brush of Texas where I have 2 tree stands on 800 acres. So it's and I love hunting from a tree too. So it's super frustrating for me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because you're probably hunting ground blinds or tower blinds and stuff for the most part, aren't you?
Yeah, there's a lot of that for sure. A majority of our stands are on the ground, and I had the first year was exclusively ground hunting. We're entering our 3rd year on this property, and last year I was finally able to get a tree stand set up and rolling, and every deer that I killed last year was out of that stand. It was, and I probably hunted honestly more than I should have last year, but I was so excited to finally be in a tree again, I guess. So
Yeah, it's definitely nice. But let me tell you, when the snow is flying and the wind's blowing 20 mile an hour, sometimes it would be nice to be in a ground blind.
Well, I get that especially, but then just coincidentally, every time that I hunted last year, or the only times that I had to get out there, was like the warmest weeks of the month and all this stuff. So I think one time I had 3 layers on, and that was it for the whole year. It was ridiculously warm every time I was out there.
Oh,
So it was
yeah.
that was frustrating too, but I still got to be in my tree late season, so it was all right.
Yep.
Well, Emily, I'll start kind of heading us toward the close of our conversation. We're kind of heading toward the time that we try to shoot for and everything, but I do have a couple of questions that we ask all of our first-time guests on our podcast that I want to hit you with. The first one being, what is your favorite or one of your favorite hunting memories? And tell us about it.
Well, I'd say quickly my favorite hunting memory was about killing myself doing the hang and hunt for freak back here.
Yeah.
In a giant shagbark hickory tree, not thinking I was going to see anything, and not even an hour later, seeing his rack towering through the woods, coming towards me in between trees, and being on my phone to getting stood up to everything working out perfectly. And he come right to the opening I needed him to. He turned broadside, turned his head, looked away. I drew back and double lunged him, and he didn't even go 60 yards.
Wow.
And then just killing a buck of a lifetime just like that, when you didn't even think you were going to see anything. And it couldn't have possibly worked out after all the commotion that I made doing all that. I would have to say that was definitely my favorite hunting memory for sure. I mean, I was stuck in the tree stand. I couldn't even get down out of the tree because I was shaking so bad. I was probably going to fall out of the tree. I was bawling my eyes out. Like I don't think there's any hunt that could outdo that evening in that hunt right there.
Wow. So I want to unpack that just real quick. What made you decide to hunt there? Because you talked a little bit about just the mentality when you were trying to pattern him with all the camera work and everything like that. What made you decide to hunt there that night?
There was a particular crossing that went into the alfalfa field that he always liked to use. So I had a camera on a fence post on that crossing there. So, and that's actually where I found his shed the previous year, was that same exact spot. And then when I pulled the camera card, that's where he was crossing at during those first few days of red moon in daylight every day. So I knew I had to hunt on that direct spot right there, that crossing. So that big shagbark hickory tree was the only tree I had to work with where the wind would be right and where I'd be able to get a shot. So that's the reasoning for hunting that particular spot, is just because that was his favorite crossing. It's where I photographed him in velvet the previous year, where I found a shed, and then where he was coming through during those first few days of red moon and daylight.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, it's crazy when you put all the work and everything into it, and you have a mental image in your mind, basically, of how you think it's all going to go down, or how it should all go down, or whatever the case might be, and then it always seems like it just happens out of the blue and so fast, and sometimes when you're least expecting it. So it's
yeah, exactly.
and I find it ironic too, like. I hear people talk about, you referenced, how much noise you made getting in there and whatnot. And, you have some folks that put in so much effort into, whether it's hunt after hunt after hunt, or just in general, whatever it might be, to scent control or being quiet or whatever. And it, sometimes just ironically, you not let your guard down. You're just not prepared. And that's when everything unfolds. It's crazy.
Yeah, it seems like every hunt that when I'm not prepared, or I forget something, or I'm running late, or I think it's not going to happen, is when it happens. So I try not to be very perfect anymore, because it never happens when everything's perfect.
Yeah.
I've learned that from experience, especially last season.
Yeah, for sure. No, I know that feeling absolutely. Well, the next question that I have for you is, I know you talked multiple times about your passion for whitetails, and that's your bread and butter back home. And then you mentioned earlier that you've done some hunting out west and everything. But what is a top bucket list hunt that you have not gotten to do yet?
Well, I'd have to say I've gotten to do it, but I haven't accomplished it, is killing a giant bull elk with my bow. I mean, that's pretty top of the list for me, besides either shooting a moose or a caribou with my bow. But I've been elk hunting. I've got a lot to learn. I have learned a lot the last few years, but just being able to kill a big bull elk with my bow is definitely, that's my next goal.
Yeah, for sure. Where do you elk hunt at?
So I'm mainly familiar with Idaho, which Idaho's over the counter, but where I had hunted there, the wolves really took over. They pretty much wiped all the elk out. So there really wasn't much elk left in the area that Dad and I tried to hunt, since the wolves had taken over. So that kind of ruined things. So that's generally the area that I have hunted most for elk, but I've been kind of looking at some other areas in some other states, but they're draw states. I already have units that I want to elk hunt. I've scouted, but it's going to take me about 10 years to get there. So
Oh wow. Yeah, it's some of that stuff's getting crazy. Like
it is. It's super tough to get drawn in some of these states, and it's so confusing, and trying to remember when you need to put in and how you need to put in and what unit. It makes my brain hurt.
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm blessed over here because we have a guy on our staff actually that is a Colorado resident, like specific to Colorado, that is, and he could recite that book as far as like all the draw application dates and the codes and all that kind of stuff, and he helped
That's
me.
handy.
Yeah, he helped me this year put in for I put in for mule deer out there in Colorado to go hunt with him.
Okay.
So that if I get it, I find out I guess here in a week or two when they post it or whatever they do, but he that'd be my first mule deer hunt if I get to go on that. So I'm excited.
Yeah,
about
that would be awesome. Colorado's got some big mule deer. I definitely want to knock that out too with my bow at some point.
Yeah, there's stuff everywhere that everybody wants to do. No, everything to do and no time to do it. So.
I know exactly.
Well, the last question I'll ask you, kind of relevant to our conversation here, and maybe I don't know, maybe reiterating a little bit of stuff, but for folks out there, whether it's a lease, an own, a permission, whatever the case might be, who are hunting those small properties, what is some of the biggest advice that you can give them if they're trying to make it happen on a small piece?
Honestly, it kind of depends. There's a lot that depends on it. Depends on your neighboring pressure. If you have a lot of other neighbors that hunt, if you live in a state that allows you to bait, if you live in a state that doesn't allow you to bait. It seems like if you live in a state that allows you to bait and all of your neighbors bait as well, unfortunately, you're going to have to be in the mix along with them in order to hopefully have success on a small piece. Otherwise, they're going to pull all the deer off that small piece and they're just going to get the chance at them and you're not. If you're not allowed to bait, definitely putting in food plots, having standing crops. One of my favorite crops is alfalfa. Alfalfa is my number one favorite thing because it greens up super early in the year and all the wildlife can utilize it. Plus it stays green very late on through the year. So that way you can hunt it clear through early season up and through rut and it stays green. The deer will utilize that. And it seems like anywhere there's an alfalfa field, there's always a big buck. So alfalfa definitely will help draw them off other pieces to your smaller chunk if you're able to plant alfalfa. But like I said, it just depends on what all you have on that small property or what your neighboring pressure is like and what your neighbors are doing. That really depends on what you have to do on your side.
Yeah. Very good. Well, thank you for that. Well, Emily, I really appreciate you joining us on this week's podcast episode. It's been fun just getting to pick your brain a little bit on just whitetails in general. I've enjoyed it.
Yes. Yep. Thanks for having me on. I always love to share any knowledge that I may have to help anybody out. So
Absolutely. For sure. Well, for our listeners, thank you all for tuning in. If you guys haven't already, whatever platform you guys are listening on, hit that follow and subscribe button. We're on all major podcast platforms, as well as YouTube, Carbon TV, Waypoint TV, and our website. Our website is fallobsession.com. That's where you guys can go to find all of our content. We are a hunting and outdoor media production company and produce a wide variety of media series, podcast, educational content. So head on over there, check us out. Ridge Rock Hunt Company is the podcast partner. Derek and Lacey over there in Mississippi, they book hunts with vetted outfitters across the country. So if you're looking to find that dream hunt, once in a lifetime experience, give Derek a call. He'll work with you on licensing, timeline, price, location, all that good stuff. So Ridge Rock Hunt Company, go check them out, and don't forget to hit up the Fall Obsession socials as well. Emily, also, you want to tell folks where they can find you on social media if they're interested in following your journey?
Yep, so I'm on Instagram. My handle is Schaad Emily. I'm pretty easy to find. So yep, you can just follow me there, or on Facebook, just the same thing, Emily Schaad on there. I mainly post on Instagram. That's my favorite place, especially for my photography and stuff. So that's where you'll find me most.
Awesome. Yeah, be sure that you guys go and give Emily a follow as well. Well, thanks again, Emily. I really appreciate it.
Yep, thank you.
All right, guys, thank you all for listening, and we'll be back again next week with another episode. As always, I'll catch you then.